Hey everyone, I hope you're having a wonderful day. I'm Justin from Free-Clep-Prep, and I just got back from retaking the American Literature CLEP. Yes, I said retaking because this was my third American Literature CLEP in the last 19 years. The things I do for you guys. I'm just kidding, I like taking tests. Now, each time I've taken this particular exam, I've been struck by just how difficult it is in the moment. And then after it's done, just how forgiving the scoring seems to be. The takeaway for you is that I don't want you to be stressed out about this exam. It's challenging, but not that hard. So let's talk about what you're likely going to see. At first glance, the fact sheet doesn't seem to tell you that much, but this right here is the important bit. If you add up all the percentages, you'll see that your knowledge of specific works and authors only makes up about 50% of the exam. I always see people asking if they need to read dozens of books to prepare for this exam, and the answer is absolutely not. You should be familiar with some of the most well-known and maybe not well-known books from different periods, but often knowing who wrote a book and identifying it by its main characters or plots is enough. This alone can turn your study time from months into days. The other 50 to 60% of the exam is, in my opinion, the easiest part. Being able to interpret those works, whether that's tone, meaning, or literary devices that the author uses. In other words, the exact same thing that the Analyzing and Interpreting Literature CLEP will test you on. That's why the ANI Lit exam is listed on Free-Clep-Prep as a foundational exam for the American Literature CLEP. And I always recommend you taking that one first if your school allows it and will give you credit. If you've taken and passed that CLEP, then over half of the American Literature and English Literature CLEP for that matter should pose almost no problem. That's a lot of credits for the same amount of study. Now let's give some example questions and I'll talk about some specific things you'll need to watch out for. As always, I'm grabbing these off the official CLEP sample sheet, which I'll link in the description. For the author and work-specific questions, you'll be seeing questions like this one. Now this one is actually easier than some of the questions you'll get on the exam because it's giving you two hints: what the plot is about and the character's name. The answer is E for those curious, and I would suggest remembering this particular question for the exam. It's a good sample question. Now let's look at the next one. This one is a little bit harder, and it's probably the most difficult type of question for me that I ran into on the test. You don't just need to know one author main character for this, but be able to pick out which pair doesn't match. While challenging, you probably won't see too many of these questions on the exam, so don't let it scare you off. And even if you only recognize one or two pairs, you can eliminate those from this type of question to improve your odds if you have to guess one of the others. Another type of question is of the analyzing and interpreting sort. Here's a decent example. As I mentioned in my other videos, my advice for any question that includes an essay is to read the question first and then figure out what you need to know from the essay. It'll save you from going back and forth and wasting time. In this case, they want you to figure out the author's tone. Of the choices, B is the best, with the speaker seemingly confused that this person's life seems so wonderful and yet obviously wasn't. Here's another one. I included this one because it points out another thing I'd like you to be careful about. After we read the question, which you did that first, right? We can read the essay and try and figure out the theme. Make sure you go through each answer instead of just picking out the first one that might be correct. There are a few here where it might be right, but it isn't until we get to the last one that we see the correct answer. If you've checked B or D, both of which could be possible, you'll miss the most correct answer, which CLEP loves to give you. They give you like 4 maybe answers and then one that's most correct. And here's the last one. You're being asked to identify which device the author is using, which in this case is an allegory because the concepts of love, health, and others are treated as actual characters. Being able to identify works by form, such as ballads, fables, epic narratives, is an important part of this exam, and you'll likely see a number of questions that ask you to do that. The same goes for stuff like this, the literary devices, such as similes, allegories, alliterations, and the list goes on. These are easy to memorize, so don't skip them in your study. Even if you only get 10 questions dealing with them, it's easy points towards a passing score, so don't neglect. Another thing you'll need to know is rhyming schemes for certain passages. Like most of the time, they'll give you the rhyme scheme itself rather than the name. So, for example, you might get AABBCC or ABABCC, and then others, and have to choose which one goes with the poem they show you. If you haven't dealt with this before, it's easy enough. You just look at the poem. All right, so this is really the last one. I'm going to give you an example of that. You see how the first line rhymes with the third, and then the second rhymes with the fourth, and then the fifth and sixth rhyme? That's the ABABCC rhyming scheme. The first rhyme is A, the second is B, and the third rhyme is C. Knowing what these rhyme schemes are called, as well as certain meters and what a meter is also going to be important. So a few more things to look out for with the American Literature CLEP. Know which authors belong to which movements, like the Beat Generation, the Harlem Renaissance, the Chicago Renaissance, the New York Modernists. Being able to identify the authors, their works, and how they fit into these movements will help you on the exam for multiple questions, not just one or two. I'm working on some graphics to put on Free-Clep-Prep that should hopefully help with that, and they'll be included with our free study guides by the time you watch this video, hopefully. Pay attention to feminist authors and their works. There are versions of the exams that will test you heavily on this, while others will only touch it. Either way, it's better to have the knowledge and not need it than to need it and not have it. It's probably a good idea to also study the timelines. Know which movements came before others, which authors were around first. In some cases, this is easy. Anne Bradstreet, for example, was a colonial writer, so she obviously came before Ernest Hemingway. In others, it may be more complicated. You don't need to memorize the publication dates, but I would have a basic idea of when the authors were around and popular. Those timeline graphics that I'm working on should hopefully help with that too. Once again, check our free study guides. It should be up by the time you watch this. As I mentioned at the beginning, this is my third time taking and passing this exam, and every time there's been almost no overlap with the previous versions of the test. So they're asking new questions, providing new excerpts, and new knowledge is being tested. There seems to be a lot of different versions of this exam. So the reason I tell you this is if you find a post or a set of flashcards from somebody saying, I made an 80 and this is all you need to study, just be careful. You might be perfectly prepared for one version, but end up taking another and be absolutely lost. Or you might get lucky, you never know. This is why we tend to take a more holistic approach at Free-Clep-Prep. We try and wrap everything you need into one place. It takes longer to learn everything, but I'd rather you spend a few extra hours than being lost whenever you sit down for the real exam. Now, if you're in a hurry, we do have our quick prep bundles, and you can get the one for American Literature CLEP absolutely free until January 27th. I usually run a free promo for every quick prep bundle we have, so hit the subscribe button if you want to learn about those as they're available. You don't really need those though. If you have time, our free study guide, free flashcards, and free practice tests are more than enough to help you pass. The bundles are just there for folks who are in a hurry. Okay, that's pretty much it for this one. More of these are on the way as I take the exams, yet again, to make sure that I'm giving you the most up-to-date information. Again, hit the subscribe button and the bell to get notified when new videos drop. And as always, we're cheering for you over here. Go get those credits, and I'll see you soon. Bye.